So, yesterday as we finished class, we talked about the story problem, domain and range. You will see the same type of thing on the test tomorrow, when we take our test on Monday, where you're given a situation, you're kind of trying to figure out what is your domain and what is your range. So, here's our next situation. Okay? So as we are looking at this on the next page of your notes, we're going to compare. And so on the test, you are also asked to compare functions, one written maybe as an equation and one as a table. You can see that this table is off, but each of those boxes later should have been filled in. But the boxes, I don't know, and we transferred from computers, it sometimes doesn't say. So you're asked to write at least 4 things to compare and contrast these two functions. So we know that they're getting apples. Sean gets, her equation is f of x is equal to 6x. Jack has, and we're going to think about this as week, and these are his apples, right? Because if we look up here, it says each week they buy a certain number of apples. So W or X, this is our week, if we're thinking about this in our equation, okay? So that function notation. So week 1, he has 4. Week 3, 12. Week 5, 20. Week 7, 28. Okay. Can we tell what the constant rate of change is? Yeah. Plus 4. So the most common mistake, I would say, is that people think that this should be a plus 8, right? But week 2, we would have been at 8 apples, right? Week 5, or week 4, right, would have been at 16. It's just that they only showed the odd weeks as you were looking at it, right? So we want to make some statements. What are some of the things that we can say? What do we know about both people's equations? Linear or nonlinear? What would you say? Marie, what do you think? Linear or nonlinear for both of them? They're both linear. So that would be a statement that we could make, right? So one of the things that we can say is that both functions are linear, right? Something else that we can say. And I'm just going to show you all of these, and when you look at them, know that when we take our test, I will either ask you for 1 or 2. So it says both functions are going to be discrete, right? We can't get like a half a week. We're just looking at in a week we buy 8 apples, or in this case Sean gets 6. So our domain of both functions is going to be whole numbers. So we're looking at that being whole numbers. The range, again, is going to be our whole numbers, and it's going to be greater or equal to 0 in this case. We aren't going to have any fractions or decimals. And it said originally that he had, Jack buys more apples, but he does not, right? He buys less apples. Oh, didn't mean to get that, sorry. So if we are looking at this, originally they had said Jack has more, but that is incorrect, right? We know that Jack actually has less apples per week because he had 4 per week, whereas Sean had 6 per week. He did have 8 apples every 2 weeks, but 8 divided by 2 gives us the 4. We can also notice that the first week, Jack started with 4, she started with 6. That'd be another thing you could say. So we're going to be asked to write on the test at least 3 or 4 different statements. I would talk about linear, nonlinear, discrete, continuous, possibly what their domains and range are. Anything else that you notice that you can make or say something about. Okay, does that make sense as we look at those? Okay. So now we have to classify our functions. And again on the test on Monday, you're going to be asked to classify. So it says your parents can sign you up for a music download service to get music for your phone. They said that you can pay, and you have to pay for it. Here are the 2 companies that you're deciding between. Look at their pricing plans and compare and answer the question. X represents the number of songs purchased, and Y is the total amount of money spent. So if we are looking at this in Danelle's, we know this is our money spent, and this is the number of songs down here. We know that S is our number of songs, right, that we are talking about. And we know this, when we look at this function C of S, that's trying to tell us the cost. So that's why they use C instead of F or G or something like that. So if we are looking at these, we can see that Danelle starts at 0 songs, we're paying $4, right? Then we go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then the price changes, right? Then it looks like we're paying how much per song? So we started off paying $1 per song, right? Per song, and then what happens when you get to, after you buy, in this case, after we are up at, once we've spent and have 5 songs, then what happens? Jody?
I'll change it to 30 cents a song.
Ooh, let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4 of them, so we should be how much a song?
25 cents.
25 cents a song, right? So now the cost is 25 cents per song, okay? So, first thing we want to think about, label each function as continuous or discrete. So you might say something like Donnell's, and if I'm looking at Donnell's, what would you say, Becca? Discrete or continuous? So if I'm looking at this, can I buy a fraction of a song?
Oh, no.
No, should be discrete, right? So I can't buy a fraction of one if I'm looking at that, right? Oh, and how about if I'm looking at JD's?
Discrete.
Discrete, because why?
Oh, you can't buy fractions.
Can't buy a half a song, right? So both of them are, would we say they are both linear? What do you think, Ryan? Are they both linear?
Oh, no.
No. Donnell's would be
Non-linear.
non-linear, right? And JD's? Linear or non-linear?
Non-linear.
So, each song is $2. So if I wanted to think of a graph, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So at 0 is 0. At 1 song I'm paying $2, right? 2 songs I'm paying $4, right? 6, 8, 10. Linear, non-linear? Linear. So if you're not sure when you're on the test and you're trying to think about making a graph and if it makes a straight line. Right? Here's the other thing. What's our variable to? First power, right? That should be a sign that it's going to be linear. So this one should be linear. On the test, I can't remember if I asked you the why it's linear or not. I think there's part of it where you have to explain, like give a reason why it's linear or non-linear. This one you could have said, oh, because it's a constant rate of change. Each song's $2. Variables to the first power. Oh, I am looking at the graph and it looks like it is a straight line. So it says, how much does each company charge per song? JD's should definitely be, if I am looking at it, Hannah, how much per song? Always what? Always $2. JD is always charging $2 per song. Donnell's is the one we were talking about, and this is where Joey was saying, oh, it started off at $1 per song, right? And then we changed it to 25 cents a song. Okay? So our cost did not stay the same. So why does Donnell's company start at 4? So if we're thinking about that, why does it start out at $4? That would be like your what? Anyone have any idea? Anyone sign up for music service or anything? Well, it is going to be our y-intercept on this one. Yes, I agree, and that'd be something you could talk about on the equate or on your test where you could talk about y-intercept. But why does it start out at 4? Because that company charges you $4 just to sign up, right? And then after that, you're paying $1 per song, and then 25 cents after that. So when we look at this one, why does it start at 4? Because the company had an initial fee, right? I don't know why they have that initial fee, but their initial fee happens to be $4, which means you don't buy a song, you just sign up, and you never buy a song, you've just paid them $4, right? And then after that, you're paying $1 per song as you are looking at that. The next question says, what does C of 5 equal? So we're going to go back to our equation, which was C of S, and we're going to replace the 5. And we're going to take 2 times the 5, in this case, and $10 for 5 songs. Okay? If we are looking at the other company, and we are looking at the songs, $5 or 5 songs, and we are at $9, right? This one just asked us to find this one. It didn't ask us to find Donnell's, but this one would be $9 if we were looking at that, okay? So, page 257 of your homework. you are only doing question 9. 23, I give you an equation. 25 and 27, okay? When you graph these, you need to have 2 positive numbers, 2 negative numbers, and 0. My hint would be, when you do page 257, to do it exactly like we did here. Pick 2 negatives, get a 0, get 2 positives, as you are looking at that, okay? You are going to finish, and I will answer questions as you guys are working. On page 265, you're doing 12 to 18. And what it asks you to do is says write a function rule that represents the situation. So, a worker's earnings, E, are a function of the number of hours N works at a rate of 8.75 per hour. You would give me something like, our function is going to be E of maybe N, the hours worked, equals, and then you're going to give me the equation, okay? So, the rest of the time, for those of you here, are either working on the B5, and you got the rest of the period, and or working on this B6, okay? Questions on anything else?